welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And hello, Adam, good to see you. So last night we started looking at a video from a channel that is just like pro-Israel propaganda called Israel Needs to Stop Apologizing, which was already wild. I mean, because like of the things that Israel needs to stop doing, apologizing isn't even something Israel, as far as I can tell, has ever started doing. But anyway, so we were looking at that, and it's interesting. Apart from just how buck wild the whole concept is. Basically, these are professional pro-Israel propagandists doing some sort of weird clone of The View called The Quad, despite the fact that there are only 3 of them, so I don't know where that comes from. But the one thing they can agree on is that Israel is losing the propaganda war, and they absolutely do not want to talk about how that might be something to do with the fact that there's simply no way to put a positive spin on what Israel and the US are actually doing. Let me just slap a content warning on here. This is going to be fucked up on a lot of levels, but it will be interesting fucked up, I hope. Let me know if I need to make any adjustments to the audio. This is from something called JNS TV. I'd never heard of it, just showed up in my fucking YouTube recommendations, and yeah, so let's just look at some propagandists from that kosher 4chan of a country that we're all so happy to hear about. Hello, River Rune, here we go. Yeah, and let me know if I need to make any changes to the audio.
Somebody there. I said, I'm Israeli now. And he laughed. And
okay, for people who don't know, who weren't here yesterday, she's the former Canadian ambassador to Israel, who is decided to go from one settler colony to another, and now she's an Israeli citizen. She is the fake deputy mayor of occupied Jerusalem. And some people will remember her because she got completely humiliated on LBC radio in Britain when she claimed that there were no churches in Gaza at a time when Israel was bombing the shit specifically out of churches in Gaza. So, and her name is Ashira, and she's here because they want to look a little bit less racist than they are.
Well, you change a little bit when you live here for a while.
And also because she's like the only person who is under 40 on the fucking panel. And they know that they are losing. They've already more or less lost Jews under 40 in North America. I mean, most Jews under 40, back during the first big Gaza massacre back in 2008-2009, Operation Cast led. The polling after that showed the Jewish community under 30 at the time just completely was alienated from Israel by that. They saw what was going on, and they could not. They just fucking couldn't. And so they have her on there basically to try to appeal to the younger generation.
Did you have it up and you're doing less apology?
I'm not apologizing. And they're still afraid to speak up. And
now there's this map of Palestine behind the former Canadian ambassador. And as the camera is going to shift a few times, clearly they have actual camera crews in these different locations. You will occasionally see the whole thing, and if you weren't here yesterday and didn't see if you notice anything special about this map when the whole thing becomes visible.
we've seen this before many, many times in history. And so I think it's a really unfortunate combination. I was there for 2 months, really getting into the muck and helping parents and talking to educators and politicians and the community, leaders in the community. And I said, why are you not leading?
Well, I mean, and the reason is quite simple, because what she's talking about when she says community leaders is pro-Israel organizations. Which is, unfortunately, anytime you look at anything that claims to be a major Jewish community organization in the US and Canada as well, and a lot of Western Europe, and a lot of other places too, they don't really have any accountability to the Jewish community because they exist mostly to sort of bludgeon Zionism into the Jewish community. They don't have any accountability or representation. So the reason they're having trouble leading again is because the game is up, basically. They can't pretend that there is some sort of, that they can represent the community while only representing Zionists. That's why they can't lead like they used to. Because at this point, it's just quite obvious that there is a major division in the community over this.
Why are you not organizing? And the response I received was, well, we can't. Each school has to organize itself. These are parents, their kids are being beaten up. I'm talking grade school. It's real. It's real. So, you know what?
See, what she was talking about earlier was supposed anti-Semitic incidents, but she didn't provide any actual examples of any of them. And the thing is, one thing you need to know, when you see these statistics, they'll say, like, there's been a 300% increase in anti-Semitic incidents, or something like that. That a lot of that comes from the far-right group called the ADL, who actually are kind of cool with neo-Nazis and stuff. Like, they pretend that their thing is, like, being a civil rights organization for Jews, but they haven't been that in, like, 70 years now. They are just a pro-Israel group. Oh, they were also a pro-South African apartheid group. They spied on anti-apartheid activists during the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. They're wonderful fucking people. But anyway, so their statistics, they cook the books by declaring all protests in support of Palestinian rights, even if they are Jewish-led and organized anti-Semitic incidents. So that's where you get that. It's not that there hasn't been an increase. There has been an increase, but it isn't anything like that. And, I mean, it's obvious why there would be an increase, because Israel does all this horrible, fucked up shit, and then they claim to be representing us when they do it.
What? You guys wake up. Like, just wake up. And they say, and this is where it gets really interesting. So many interesting things. But many people in North America say, and I was having this conversation with an Israeli activist who just returned from New York. And she said to me, we're letting them down. They're looking to us for leadership. We're not doing our job. Israel, I said, nope, don't agree. Israel, we got more than a full plate here. We got a lot.
Nobody's, who the fuck, yeah. Who's they are looking to us for leadership? The Jewish community is not looking to Israel for leadership. Okay? These organizations are, because they are pro-Israel organizations. Which is also why they're absolutely useless when it comes to anti-Semitism. They don't really want to fight anti-Semitism. Zionist ideology says you literally cannot fight anti-Semitism. It is just a natural thing, and also it's supposedly our fault for insisting on living in the places we're from rather than colonizing Palestine. Which is why you have a long tradition of the Zionist movement just allying themselves with our, like, mortal enemies, and they're doing it right now. Like, some of the most anti-Semitic motherfuckers in European politics right now, big friends of the Israeli government, big friends of Zionism.
On our plate, they need to step up. They need to take charge. Not always, they don't defer to us over anything else, right?
That's a good point.
Take charge. Each community has its own specific issues and challenges.
Characteristics. Yeah, personality.
Yeah.
Sure, do you agree with Vivian that the diaspora communities should be actually more active or should not be waiting for us for leadership? And how do you see your own role?
We're not.
And the role of many Jews
We're
of color. I know
literally
that you guys
not.
are going to go out there and really talk about the diversity in Israel. How do you see all this, blending in to the work that you're trying to do?
I agree that we do need to take the conversation to the communities. The communities should be organizing. They should be at the forefront. They should be leading. And they should
Okay, notice the North American accent here. What's her deal? I've never heard of her. Oh, she's not Jewish at all. I'm looking at her Twitter bio. I am not Jewish. I am not Israeli. I am black. I am Christian. I am American. So she is one of these fucking fundamentalist Christians. Okay, I had assumed that she was there to help paper over Israel's treatment of Jews of color, and now it turns out they couldn't even find like Jews of color to be on this thing. She's just a black right-wing Christian from the U.S. I was like, okay, that's good to know. I was giving her more benefit of the doubt that she deserved.
be collaborating and working together. However, the issue I have with hasbara and explaining ourselves is what you said earlier. We can talk and we can talk and we can talk. And
Ourselves? What do you mean ourselves? Israel would not let her have citizenship.
people don't care. I really believe the strongest defense is letting the land of Israel speak for herself.
And yeah, that's going so fucking well. That is going so fucking well for you. Where, like, these fucking Israeli goon squads are filming themselves doing, like, this, like, deeply disturbing, unfunny, horrible plagiarism of the David Chappelle Show Rick James Fuck Yo Couch sketch on the homes of people in Gaza who maybe are dead, have certainly been expelled from their homes, and just wrecking their shit and filming themselves like they're having a grand old time, and it plays really well in Israel, apparently. Like, it gets celebrated in Israeli media, but I mean, it's just they're so steeped in this fucking kosher 4chan of a fucking country that they have absolutely no idea how this shit comes off to normal people. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be Zionism if they didn't have at least one representative of the biggest anti-Semites in the entire world who also happen to be the biggest fans of Zionism,
And what I mean by that is having
which is fundamentalist Christians.
more delegations of Jews and non-Jews.
I mean, really, the thing to remember about Zionism is the absolute majority, like, not even close, of Zionists in the world and in the US are fundamentalist Christians. Jews are a tiny minority in that movement.
To the land of Israel.
Coming here.
Coming here.
Which is, by the way, you're 100%
Hello,
right.
Phoenix. Good to
Statistically,
see you.
it's always been the best result of anything.
Because
people say apartheid, they walk around and they see Arabs sitting in cafes next to Jews. They're like,
Yeah, except that's not... What's really funny is that that's actually not the experience that I've heard a lot of. Like, I remember my mother found this very memorable. This was somebody she worked with said a long time ago. Teenage girl went on, I think, one of these like birthright type trips or some shit. And my mom asked her, like, what's your impression of the place? And she goes, oh, it's so fucking racist. Like...
As you land at Ben Gurion,
yeah.
you know there's not apartheid.
Yeah.
You go to the bathroom, it doesn't say Arab.
Yeah, I mean, around the time that there's, like, separate queues if you're Jewish or not, and they actually will test whether you're Jewish, and if they don't think you really are, they will take you aside. Yeah, I mean, definitely, the Israeli airports are definitely a wonderful example of how there's totally not apartheid in Israel.
And Jews, whites and blacks. it busts the myth like this, right?
Yeah, until you find out about how Ethiopian Jewish women were forcibly sterilized and how they stole the babies from Yemeni Jews because they don't like, because Zionism does not really like Arab Jews, because the thing about Arab Jews is they are not European Jews, and Zionism is just very much a European German ideology.
Away. And so I really believe that the land of Israel can speak for herself. And I think the strategy should be more delegations. And I know you work
and I'm
as a
totally
deputy
for
mayor.
that. I'm totally for that, I have to say. As an anti-Zionist, totally. Let Israel speak for themselves. They're doing such a wonderful job, not of showing us exactly what they fucking stand for. Showing us exactly what they stand for. They step aside. Don't try to make it palatable. Just let us get a nice, tasty whiff of the fucking air that is being breathed there right now. And I mean, because every time Israel actually gets a chance to speak for itself, more people realize that maybe anti-Zionists have a point.
To do more tourism to Jerusalem, and I think that is the best strategy.
Well, we're bringing in a few groups.
We're
Yeah, just keep them away from
Yes,
Sheikh
and
Sharaf,
right
I
on
guess.
point.
But yes, absolutely. And we're now bringing groups to come and volunteer. We're kind of going back to the old 1970s where people used to come to kibbutzes to see what pure socialism/communism actually looked like.
Right.
Well, pure is an interesting word to be using there, since like no Palestinians were allowed in this communism. And later on, they actually started hiring Palestinians to do wage labor in the kibbutzes, which is you know, I mean, Caleb Maupin. That's a form of communism that Caleb Maupin would recognize, except it involves Jews, and he doesn't like Jews.
Today, actually, we have
That would be like
incredible
the one
Christian
thing he'd
groups
object
and
to.
Jewish groups coming to volunteer in agriculture because we are shorthanded because of the foreign workers that run away in fear, as you can't
Justifiably.
blame.
Oh, so yeah. Not to mention they get treated like shit. They get treated like shit, and the thing is, the reason they need to rely on workers from like the Philippines and Thailand. A big part of what they see, it used to be that they were massively dependent on Palestinian workers from the West Bank. And the trouble was that Palestinian workers from the West Bank could like occasionally strike, and it would really cause them problems because they couldn't wipe their own asses without Palestinian workers from the West Bank. And so the first thing they did was brought in huge amounts of Soviets. Like, I mean, yeah, often with very little interest in whether they were Jewish in any sense at all. They just cared that they were white, basically. And the thing is that still hasn't been enough, so they've had to like bring in like migrant workers from Southeast Asia, and they get treated like shit, and a lot of them don't want to spend a whole lot of time there.
You can't blame them. And so we've had a real problem down south with farming, with picking fruit, with putting seeds down for next year's harvest.
You know who was actually doing a lot of farming? You know, maybe if you're having such trouble farming, you shouldn't be bulldozing people's olive groves. I'm just sitting here thinking because, like, they were doing a lot of farming in Gaza, and you keep on wrecking their farmland.
And I'm really proud to say that an organization I'm involved with, Kol Israel, has already brought its second group, and another good friend of mine, Tammy, from Kesher Tours, is bringing more groups. And so it's becoming a thing, and I think that actually works in both ways. We're bringing people to help, to volunteer, to feel they're part of the rehabilitation, but we're also bringing people
Rehabilitation.
to see what this is really about.
Yeah, and I think that on that point, I want to just flip it and go back to North America, because sorry to be so North American centric if there's someone in Australia watching, but it is.
Wait, she's in Australia. She's just like collecting the entire box set of settler colonies. And I mean, try not to be North American centric. You got two fucking North Americans and one of them isn't even like.
I'm from Gibraltar, it's fine. I make the numbers up.
I have to pretend I'm
This is from
American.
fucking Gibraltar! And another British settler colony. And a big, its main existence, the main point of its existence these days is that it's a massive tax haven. Like, all sorts of rich people in Britain have their, like, our residence in Gibraltar for tax purposes.
At the time, so
So, like, literally none of these fucking people is actually, yeah, I mean, like, not even, like, in the sense of, like, being descended from settlers who are already there. These are all, they're all just, like, they just got there, and they get to talk about this. Like, I mean, one of them isn't even, yeah, I mean, this is great. This is really demonstrating how fucking indigenous Zionist settlers are to the area. Like, not a single one of them is from there.
I love America. I do. I love America. But I think that also, you know, to the degree that Israel kind of gets back together and organizes more effective, I don't want to use the word hasbara, but just kind of like diplomacy.
Hasbara, for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, literally means explanation. It is an Israeli term that is used to mean propaganda for foreign consumption. It literally means explanation because the idea is that what Israel's doing is so obviously right that if anyone objects to it, it's just that they don't understand and they need to have it explained to them slowly. And the whole thing has been so far about how badly their propaganda is flopagandaing in the midst of the genocide that they're committing.
Yes.
We should be doing, and I'm doing it in Canada, outreach to non-Jewish communities.
Oh,
and not just the evangelists and, you know, specific identifiable groups. Basically, people who don't know about Israel and aren't Jewish. And
yeah, because the point is, if they know about Israel, you've already lost them. If they're Jewish, they probably already have a pretty good idea about Israel, and either they're definitely already on side, but you could still lose them. I mean, I'm pretty sure every time Israel puts out one of these fake-ass videos, they're losing. Every time they do one of these massacres in Gaza, they're, like, losing people in the Jewish community and outside it, who can't with this. Who, like, have actually reached the point where they simply cannot justify it anymore. But, so she's saying people who are not in the Jewish community and also have never, like, heard of Israel so they can lie to them more effectively, I guess.
may just be kind of overwhelmed with the kind of sewage coming at them. They don't know.
They don't know. 70%, I always say 15% hate us. There's no point in trying to convince them.
Exactly.
It's a waste of energy. 15%, I would like to think, love us. Between the other Jews and the
They just making this stats up, or they wrote?
I actually read it somewhere. There's a source for this. I mean, they're very
yeah.
broad strokes. Don't hold me down to the percentage. But the extreme lovers, extreme haters, and then most people in the middle.
The big broad middle.
The big broad middle. And
the big broad middle, it's worth noting, overwhelmingly hates what Israel's doing in Gaza and supports the ceasefire. I mean, the figures on that in the U.S. in particular is indeed very North America centric. It's like over 60% of the population as a whole say that there needs to be a ceasefire fucking yesterday, and 80% of people who vote for Democrats say there needs to be a fucking ceasefire. Like, literally, it's interesting. When was this made? I feel 6 days ago. 6 days ago. Notice how they are not talking about certain things. They have not talked about Gaza at all. They have not brought it up at all. It's like this whole thing is about why their propaganda isn't working, and they're not going to talk about like why their propaganda isn't working. They're not they haven't brought up. I mean, it's probably a sore subject for Fleur Nahum here, because it looked like a complete ass denying that there were churches in Gaza to a radio presenter who knew perfectly well what the facts were. Yeah, she is exactly, River Ridge. She's trying to confuse ignorant people.
a good friend of mine, actually, Joe Landau, who we'll have on our show, wrote a book about this. She speaks about the extremes and the people in the middle. And in the people in the middle, you know, what either here or there, they're getting a lot of negative messaging, and those are the people. You're 100% right. And on that point, yesterday I was interviewed on LBC Radio.
Oh, so I'd been wondering. I had not looked at the date. So this is the interview. I showed it yesterday because she was just totally humiliated because she was lying her ass off, claiming that there were no churches in Gaza, even as Israel, and that there was no Christian community in Gaza. And she claimed that, oh, it's the Palestinians won't allow Christians in Gaza or something like that. Which is such bullshit. Like, people in the Christian community in Gaza point out they're an integral part of the community as a whole. Like, the YMCA is the gym that most people use, no matter what their religion. For example. So, and she just kept on going on about this, and the guy wasn't having it, and pointed out that, yeah, there are a number of churches there. So here we go. I can't wait to hear how she tries to spin this, since, you know, she's such an expert on propaganda.
About the Israeli bombing of a church in Gaza, and I misspoke, and I said
You
there's
didn't
no
misspeak.
churches in Gaza when I meant to say there's no Christians in Gaza.
Right.
Which is also wrong. She did say there are no Christians in Gaza, and that is a lie, actually. And she did say that, and the presenter did in fact say, yeah, actually there are tons of Christians in Gaza. We've had an MP here who is of Palestinian descent talk about, who's part of the Gaza Christian community, has family members taking refuge in these churches, and she just didn't know what the hell to do with that. It was...
And of course, there are about 200 Christians in Gaza.
700,
There used to be 5,000 before Israel left Gaza in 2005. And
Yeah, that's not it, actually. That's complete bullshit.
my point was, which I've been turned into a big villain in the last...
Yeah, because the thing is that it's weird how you look like a villain when you talk about the intended result as if it's already happened when it hasn't yet. You know, it's sort of like if a German government spokesperson were to say, oh, there are no Jews in Poland. You know, and it's like, well, yeah, that's clearly your fucking goal, but it hasn't happened yet.
last 24 hours. But my point was that Hamas have has systematically, ethnically cleansed Christians from the Gaza Strip.
Which is a lie. I mean, like, if anyone would have a reason to talk about how horrible they've been treated by Hamas in Gaza, it would be Palestinian Christians from Gaza, and that's not what they have to say. They do not have to say that at all. Their problem they have, the only people who are trying to kill them, are fucking Israel.
And whoever's left does not have a life of freedom of worship. Israel is the only country in the Middle East where the Christian population is actually growing.
This is this is wild, because in Jerusalem there has been massive Zionist violence against Christians, Palestinian Christians, it's worth noting. This has been particularly bad in the recent weeks, actually, in the city that she is the fake deputy mayor of.
Bethlehem.
I was gonna say you gotta.
You gotta talk about Bethlehem. You mean the people where they canceled Christmas because of the genocide? Oh, I can't wait to see what she's gonna say about this.
Bethlehem, which under Israeli rule until the early 2000s, there were 85% Christians. Today there's 12%.
Wow.
Yeah, I wonder, so you're saying under Israeli rule, because they're still under Israeli rule. They are still under Israeli occupation. So I'm not sure this is the flex that you're going for.
They've been running
And so,
down.
yes, I misspoke.
Crazy.
Yes, there are 3 old churches in Gaza. But make no mistake, Hamas is no friend of the Christians, just like it's no friend of the Jews. And the Islamic fundamentalism is going to go after Christians in the same way it wants to go after Jews.
Which is sort of weird because Hamas have been actually at great pains to make it clear their problem isn't with Jews. You know, they got, they had more or less abandoned that charter from the 1980s, which did have some seriously fucked up anti-Semitic shit in it. They had abandoned it by 2008 when they were offering to come to terms with Israel based on the 1967 borders. And Israel had responded by just murdering huge numbers of people in Gaza repeatedly. But so they got sick of people pointing at this charter that they had already abandoned for all intents and purposes and rewrote it. And they very specifically said in this new version, it says, our problem has nothing to do with Jewish people or the Jewish religion or anything like that. Our problem was with the Zionist movement and the Zionist ideology. So, yeah, no. In fact, I mean, if you listen to, like, the speeches of, like, Abu Ubaidah, there's a fucking a great YouTube channel that is Learn Arabic through, like, authentic materials. And a lot of the materials are just speeches from the Palestinian resistance. And they are very careful. I mean, Abu Ubaidah, in his speeches, is very careful to make this distinction.
They
And
already
so
are.
you can catch me on a moment that I misspoke and turn me into a
Misspoke?
villain
Fuck
online.
off.
But the people out there,
Didn't
I've had
misspeak.
hundreds of Christians reaching out and said, Flo, we know what you meant. And you're
Yeah, hundreds of white Christians. Hundreds of white-ass fundamentalist Christians who don't give a shit about the Christian community, about Palestinian Christians. Because they worship whiteness. They're the ones who made Jesus blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
100% right. And so, sorry for misspeaking.
But you, as you admitted, you aren't 100% right. There are 700 Christians in fucking Gaza. There are multiple churches. So how are you 100% right when you denied both of those things?
But the principle is that the Middle East used to have 20% Christians, and today it has 4% Christians.
Yeah, let me just see. Are these figures even correct? Linked to what? Okay. Okay, in the early 20th century, it was 13%. Now it's 5%. So she managed to get it wrong on all sorts of levels. What do you want to link to?
And that's because of Islamic fundamentalism. And between 1948 and 1967, when the old city of Jerusalem was under the illegal Jordanian occupation after
You're going to talk about illegal occupations now, are you?
the 48 war, no Christians and no Jews could go and worship at their places of prayer, places of worship, and it's only under Israeli sovereignty.
Okay. Let me see if I can find that. It's like Talk Arabic Now or something like that. Talk Arabic Today, that's what it is. Here we go. I mean, methodologically, I have to say it's no worries. There were like 5 different things you might have wanted to link for, and I wanted to be sure I got you the right one. This is the channel. And I mean, methodologically, it isn't exactly the way I would go about it, but it's interesting, and I love that he's using these sort of current events materials, because, I mean, a lot of people, myself included, who are trying to learn Arabic, like, I have this very rudimentary Arabic, and slightly less rudimentary Hebrew. Neither of them I'm particularly competent in, but a big part of why I'm interested is to be able to follow, like, Al Jazeera Arabic and stuff like that, because I really do not trust a lot of the translations that are out there, because, a lot of translations are just bullshit.
that we have real freedom of worship in the city of Jerusalem.
And throughout Israel. I just want to add 2 things, kind of non sequiturs, but related. One is that, if I'm not mistaken, there is at least one.
Why didn't you have, like,
ancient?
Why didn't you have, like, a Palestinian Christian on here to give a take if you're so confident that they will back you up on that?
Throughout Israel. I just want to add two things, kind of non sequiturs, but related. One is that, if I'm not mistaken, there is at least one, maybe more, ancient synagogue in Gaza.
Yeah.
Okay, so that does.
Well, who knows? They probably bombed that shit too. I mean, the third oldest church in the world was there. I mean, now it's fucking rubble.
Doesn't mean that Hamas is really
A friend.
of the Jews or support. Like I did read something the other day about some IDF soldiers kind of going into and praying in the ruins of this old synagogue.
Now, who made it a ruin? I'm kind of curious. Who made it a ruin? Because I mean, let's just note. Actually, during the U.S.-Israeli assault on Lebanon in the early '80s, it was Palestinian resistance fighters who protected the main synagogues in Beirut from Israeli attack.
In the Gaza Strip. And the other thing I want to point out apropos our kind of outreach and, kind of getting to what's been one of the many fascinating things, and it went viral over the last weekend, you may have missed it, but in a number of malls, right? It's pre-Christmas, we're a week from Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, we all lived abroad, we know.
Yeah, I mean, and in Bethlehem, Christmas is canceled, and it's not because of it's because they feel it would be indecent to have a big public celebration while their people are being genocided.
That Christmas is
Christmas.
Christmas envy. Big time.
Miss Christmas.
Big time.
And last year, in the old city of Jerusalem, in the Christian quarter, the city of Jerusalem put together, is the fourth year, a Christmas market. And we were there.
Nice.
How
beautiful.
Okay, but it's like it's that kind of saccharine, really cheesy North American Christmas. That,
Yeah, there's a reason for that. I wonder why it is that it is a saccharine, cheesy North American Christmas and not, say, like Christmas as one of the oldest Christian communities on the entire planet celebrates it. I wonder if there's a reason for that.
You don't like it?
I love it.
Oh,
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I miss it. The only thing I've gone down in the YMCA Christmas tree. And that's all we've been left with.
The food and like the
And all
whole
the
world shuts
lights.
down.
The whole world shuts down.
Between and it's like it's Christmas.
I love
Anyhow, so I actually once had a boss. Okay, but I have to tell this small story. But I once had a boss, and I was general counsel in this company. He was the CEO, and he says to me, "No, Viv, really, what do you guys do on Christmas? You're serious?"
I know the answer.
And I said, "No, boss, really, what do you guys do on Yom Kippur?"
Good one, right?
Yeah, you see, this is what, like, I think, I don't know if there's anyone Jewish in chat or watching this thing, but being Jewish myself, what really, really sucks about all of this, there's like, there's universalist sort of ways in which it sucks, in which Zionism sucks, but the way in which they have, like, taken my fucking culture and sort of woven it into this fucked up kosher 4chan shit. So that, I mean, it is a very skillful way of manipulating Jews, I'll say that. Because, like, I think all of us have some version of that story, but on the other hand, it's like, I don't give a fuck, like, fuck off. You're talking about how to do better propaganda for genocide. I really do not care about your cute little fucking, what do you do for Yom Kippur story. I mean, Yom Kippur, for anyone who doesn't know, that is the Day of Atonement. Like, and these motherfuckers are doing it wrong. Because the whole point of the atonement thing is that you don't do it again, and clearly they've just, like, they're cooking the books on the things they're atoning for or some shit.
I know. I know that's one of my best line answers.
Oh my God, it's a great line. But I can't remember what it was, some big Congress committee meeting, and there were two Jews on different sides, and it said, I do what all Jews do on Christmas. We go out for Chinese food.
Yeah, except I don't like Chinese food that much. But it's, I know.
Thai food.
Whatever. No, Chinese food, being Chinese. But that I just serious point. The serious point is that number of malls in Toronto, it's not just in Toronto, in Toronto and Ottawa, across the country.
Yeah.
the pro-Hamas crowd
Yeah,
were
saw that.
there.
Yeah, but which she just means. See, God, this is a thing that they did during the Rwandan genocide too. Like the the people, the like Interahamwe and the people in the government who were stoking the Rwandan genocide, they were very careful to say that their problem was with the Tutsi League, or the Front Patriotique Rwandais, which was a paramilitary group led by a guy who went on to be the current president of Rwanda. But everybody knew that when they were talking about the Tutsi League or whatever, that they were just talking about Tutsis. They made it very clear. So, I mean, and this is what they're doing here. This idea that, I mean, if you're against, like, murdering tens of thousands of people, that you must be, like, supporting a particular faction of them.
In force, and they were threatening.
Oh, you got any, like, video where they say that they are pro-Hamas?
Children going to sit on Santa's lap.
No.
Where so you got video of that too, because so far we've just got a protest.
Wow.
So they're out in these malls, they're targeting Zara, they're threatening shoppers, and
I mean, you've got video here. Can you show us them threatening shoppers? You're gonna show us that, right? You're gonna show us them doing the threatening of the shoppers.
the Santas are there, and the little kids are there, and they're bawling.
And the
And
government.
Then why don't we see any of this on film? You picked this clip. If what you're saying is true, why the fuck do we not see it?
Doesn't wake up with that, Vivian.
No, just
No,
well, come here. Wait. No,
we can't go through
And I wonder if there's a reason that they were protesting.
an episode without.
Justin Trudeau.
We can't get through it.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Tell us what he's been doing.
So he's been silent. There's been an uncovered this week in Canada very serious arrests with respect to a terrorist plan, terrorism charges. The RCMP discovered plans to make a bomb, ball bearings, chemical additives, plans, everything, intentions.
Well, they had plans and intentions. I mean, keep in mind, the RCMP is Canada's feds. If you aren't familiar with, like, Canadian copdom, they're the people who do the really sophisticated stitch-ups. So I haven't heard anything about this. I don't really pay close attention to Canada, but I've got a lot of comrades in Canada who post. Well, then again, that's right, because Facebook will not let Canadians post news anymore. Or if, like, people outside of Canada post Canadian news, Facebook will not let Canadians see it. Because Canada passed a law that said that if you link to a Canadian news site on social media, the social media platform has to pay the news site for what is in fact free advertising. And so Zuckerberg responded to this by just making it impossible for Canadians to share news. No, I mean, the whole thing is a sick irony. I mean, they're sitting here talking about, I mean, they have not once in this thing mentioned why it is that maybe Israel's having a bit of a PR problem right now.
Social media posts. They're youths, so we don't know their names. It's really serious. So, my Justin, he went underground. He's been quiet since this arrest late last week. He said nothing about all of the Santa attacks. Really? Nothing. And he came out.
Santa attacks? What Santa attacks? Like, was that video? Is that what that was supposed to be there? Because I didn't see any Santa attacks in that fucking video. Hey, chat, did you see anyone getting attacked in that video?
With something very lame last night, saying, "Gee, this is kind of
unfortunate."
Yeah, it's kind of worrying. But the thing is, for our people listening and for us, is that you should see my Twitter feed now. It's all these outraged, indignant, kind of regular Canadians. Like, You're making kids cry going to Santa.
Yeah, I'm sure they're regular because what's interesting is I keep on hearing this line. Like right wingers, these like protests around Christmas, like when they did like the tree lighting in Manhattan and shit as well. And what I'm hearing from like report backs from people who actually were at these protests is that a lot of people, a lot of like random people who weren't there for the protest actually thanked them. Hello, Adria.
And I'm like, yeah, isn't that horrible?
Yeah.
So we need to really leverage. It's important.
Yeah.
Because now they've not really paid attention in the broad population to the fact that it's really not just about us. We're just first.
That's
It's
what
about infidels
and the free
Yeah.
world.
Oh, yeah, that's what's going on. It's about infidels. It's not that people are protesting over a very specific horrible thing that is going on with the complicity of the Canadian government under the control of the U.S. government. They haven't said a word about that. Like, well, no, they have. Because she was trying to explain, since she's been, like, talking about what a fucking great propaganda buffin she is, how she got humiliated on LBC radio because she tried to lie about there not being Christians and churches in Gaza, and the guy knew better and pointed out that she was full of shit.
Exactly. I
Right.
think that's what these incidences, and like London, we saw many of these things prove.
Many of these things being protests against the genocide. Protests of, massive. Like, people I know who were at them say they've not seen anything like this in over 20 years. Like, a good friend of mine who was at two of the protests in London, he was telling me, a protest is big when you nip away from the march to go and get something to eat. You go into the restaurant, you get your food, you eat it, you come back, and the march still hasn't finished passing by. Like, that's what these incidents are that they're talking about here. Yeah, it's the war on Christmas. But, well, everywhere except for the one place where they're bombing churches. There's no war on Christmas there. Israel is just really great with Palestinian Christians, as so many of them will tell you if Israel lets them out of prison.
That really we're just the first stop on this big tour of turning the whole world into a caliphate. We're all infidels to these Islamic extremists. I feel bad for all the moderate Muslims that I know and
She has Muslim friends.
that I have deep friendships with
Yeah.
because they're, mortified and embarrassed.
I think we should do a media campaign where we just like release the Hamas charter. Like just
Yeah, but make sure that you release the current one that very specifically says that Hamas doesn't have a problem with Jews.
It's been
and
done.
read it. Just read. Like people are not reading.
People
No,
don't
they
want
don't
to
care.
read
They
it.
don't. They say
It's cognitive dissonance, and there's unfortunately too many radicals out there that are actually poisoning the minds of regular people.
Yeah.
I wonder if regular people might just be watching the shit that Israel puts out and that's enough to turn them off.
Well, some of them are well-meaning, some of them are just ignorant. But seeing as we were talking about strong
Like,
female,
what fucking planet are these people on? They're gonna pretend that what's going on at these Christmas protests against the genocide, they very carefully avoided showing footage that showed any of the the placards people are holding and stuff. That is actually about that it's a radical Islamic protest against Christianity in North America. Like anyone, right? Like even the radical Islamists who, there certainly are probably some, are saying that sounds like a really shitty idea. It sounds like you get your ass kicked doing something like that. Nobody would be fucking do that. Nobody. It's not. They're trying to make this like it's a protest against Christmas. This is like, and they're saying this with a fucking straight face. And then they're talking about why does our propaganda flop like it does?
Voices of hasbara. One of the women, when I moved here in 2001, we were in the middle of the
Oh, now I want to see Phoenix's new profile picture. Oh, I like Andrea's profile picture. You see Phoenix. Oh, lovely. Yeah, lovely profile picture. Love it.
second intifada. Not a great time to move to Jerusalem. My husband and I came right at that moment.
These motherfuckers have only been there since the 2000s. Acting like they fucking own the place.
And on the hasbara, on TV, I thought one of the people doing the best job was Colonel Mary Eisen,
Yes.
who today
I really like
is
her.
the director of the Counterterrorism Institute at Reichman University. And Vivian and I had the real honor of interviewing Mary Eisen. So this week,
Oh, this should be interesting. Okay, so this is what she thinks is good propaganda.
on our episode of The Quad, where we've been talking about hasbara, doing a deep dive in what's working, what's not working, I have to say, I'm so thrilled, myself and Vivian, to have one of the legends of hasbara. When I moved to Israel,
Legends. Oh, the legends of hasbara. I mean, like, just legends. Nobody can lie like her, apparently.
in 2001, in the
Wait, does the former Canadian ambassador to Israel just always wear fucking white turtlenecks?
middle of the second intifada, there was one person, one image that I would watch on TV defending Israel, and I would feel good about our hasbara efforts. And a few weeks ago, I had the real privilege of actually meeting her face to face. She's an inspiration to myself as well as many other women. Colonel Mary Eisen, who today is the head of the Counterterrorism Institute in Reichman University, an incredible 20, 30-year career in the military intelligence. Thank you for
okay, she's tortured some people.
being with us on the Quad, Mary.
All I can say is it's such an honor to be invited to be on the Quad. I feel like I'm just, with your...
What? Another fucking North American accent. Where is this Miri Eisen even from? I mean... California. She's from fucking California. I mean, why should I be surprised? The PM's from Philly. She's from fucking California. I mean, you see, one of the things that always gets me, I haven't heard it in a while, but I'm sure it'll come back. This shit always does. One, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, Fash, to put out there is, this thing about all the dual citizens, supposedly, the U.S.-Israeli dual citizens in the government, and it's bullshit. It's a lie. All they're just talking about is Jews. They're preying on the fact that most people don't realize that it is an automatic dual citizenship we get. We just have a claim to Israeli citizenship that we can't waive. But we, in order to actually get the citizenship, you do have to request it. But anyway, but the reality is, if there's any place where there are enough dual citizens that you'd have to start to say that there is a certain amount of, state capture, almost, it's Israel. Every single fucking level of government there is full of U.S. citizens. It's full of them. The whole thing. But it doesn't matter all that much. Yeah, it's a huge wine fest. So she's from fucking California.
The celebs, I'm just joining in.
Oh, thank you. We're only Jewish celebs. Anyway, but
No, you're not even that.
let's talk a little bit about hasbara, because you've really seen the whole curve. And I wanted to ask you one very simple question. How is this war different to other wars, or
Oh, wow, okay, we're finally going to get into the fucking elephant in the room.
maybe the hardest one that I've experienced?
I thought or maybe she's talking about the fucking Muslimic ray gun war on Christmas now.
Seeing you on TV, which was a second intifada. How do you feel things have changed?
So first of all, I don't think that this war in itself is the hardest, but I do actually think that when it comes to hasbara, it's the worst. There's a difference between the hardest and the worst. And what do I mean?
What do you mean that in terms of propaganda, when your own fucking side is putting out stuff that makes it clear that you're just a bunch of fucking Nazi-ass ghouls, that it's very difficult to sell that as anything other than just ghoulish, fucked up Nazi shit?
That this war is the first time for me. I've been in Israel for 52 years. I've been in public diplomacy,
Another cute word for propaganda.
speaking on behalf of the state of Israel, literally from the late 1990s, but certainly in the Second Intifada. And what can I say? I've never met overt, harsh, microaggression,
Microaggression. Oh, the microaggressions. That's the real tragedy right now. Will somebody please think of the microaggressions that the Zionists are being subjected to?
anti-Semitism everywhere. And I say that for me, as somebody who speaks, I talk to different
She's
people
the
on
real
TV,
victim.
and I'm always nice, and I'm the mother.
Oh, well, if she's nice and she's a mother, then, how can you possibly fault her for doing genocidal propaganda?
And I've always shared those sort of things. And I've never met that microaggression before where I'm being framed in a specific way.
What specific way?
And I say overtly, anti-Semitism, we have been put in
For example?
Somebody has decided to judge us.
You judge you as a representative of a state that is carrying out genocide. Wow, people can be so harsh.
To frame us that way. We always
Frame
have...
us what way? Frame you what way? Well, what the fuck? Even the fucking former Canadian ambassador down here is squinting what the fuck? Where's she going with this? I mean, Donald Pleasance already laid the groundwork for it being a ghoul uniform, because if you watch, the dystopian supervillain movies that he was in the 1970s, he's always rocking the white turtleneck.
have a challenge of how it's framed, but this time it's beyond the pale.
For example, are you gonna get into it? I mean, are you gonna try to explain how to frame this that it isn't actually just fucked up ghoulish shit?
Can you give a specific example of that, Miri?
Yeah, okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's called, you go on to whatever it is, BBC, where it's very overt.
The BBC have actually been giving Israel a real break. In fact, as I think River Rune was pointing out in chat, just recently, when some of the Palestinian hostages were being released, they had a woman on, and she was interviewed, and she was talking about the way she was tortured by Israeli forces. I'm not going to get into details about that. It's fucked up, but you can find this. And what she said, and what the subtitles said, the subtitles completely left out the torture that she was talking about, and instead, had her saying, Hamas is the only ones who care about us, or something like that. She didn't even use the word Hamas. Right? So, it's Channel 4, on the other hand, has actually been doing, journalism. They've been the one who have really been sort of chasing down some of the leads on this propaganda. When they blew up the El Ahli hospital a few months ago and then pretended they didn't and brought out all that fake-ass audio and stuff, it was actually Channel 4 in Britain that did a really good job of pointing that out.
I actually pick and choose at this stage along the way where I go. And they tell you that you're going to be on at 7 minutes after the hour.
So her complaint is she can go on literally any media outlet. Is she saying that Palestinians have it even better than that? Because, I've noticed that there has actually been this, gradual disappearance of on-screen Muslims and Arabs on, North American TV in the past few months.
And you're sitting there, and that's okay. They have somebody that's talking from the United Nations Relief and Welfare Agency, UNRWA, from Jordan. And then they have somebody who's talking from UNICEF, either from Europe or possibly from the Gaza Strip. And then they have another journalist who's talking directly from the Gaza Strip. And then...
So her problem is that there are people providing the facts.
And they go, okay, and then they ask you the question in a harsh, negative way.
Yeah, like what? What's the question? Show me what's the fucking question? Why are you like avoiding the specifics here? Like, get into it. What's the question that they're being so negative about? Show us how you could be positive about the question.
So what do you have to say after we just showed you death, destruction, and horror in the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, well, I see why it might be hard to spin that positively. So her problem, the microaggression she's complaining about, is that they didn't like try to put a happy face on the death and destruction that she's there to justify. Like, you could fucking retire. You don't have to be justifying the mass murderer. If you're finding it hard to justify, if you're finding that to be an uncomfortable position to be in, get on the right side of this fucking thing while you still can. Seriously. I mean, I have no doubt, because we've seen this before. We saw this with Vietnam, for example. That a lot of ghouls are gonna turn around at some point. Some of them probably already are, or are laying the groundwork for it, and claim to be an early opponent of this stuff. I mean, we just, you're finding it hard to justify it, then don't justify it. Just, you could get ahead of this. You'll be a fucking hero if you just resign on air and say, I can't do this. This is absolutely unjustifiable. Nobody will even inquire into all the stuff that you had found completely justifiable. Plenty of libs will be completely happy to just overlook all that shit.
And essentially it's framing it, here we are, we've just brought you up, and now you got to explain or describe what is unexplainable.
See, the reason she's using the term explain here is because, again, the Israeli word for Israeli propaganda for foreign audiences literally means to explain. So when they say explain, lehaspir, or is it lehispir? I'm not sure. My Hebrew, as I said, a bit rudimentary, a bit basic. But what that means is justify. So when she says it's not explainable, she's kind of like, the implication is that she can't come up with a reason why this isn't a bad thing.
Defend yourself, even though you're the victim.
The biggest change was the whole...
But the point is, you're clearly not the victim. It's easier to explain yourself when you are, because then you can say, yeah, they did some fucked up shit to me, didn't they? It was horrible. But the reason that it's hard for her to explain is that she's being called on to justify horrific shit her regime has done to them.
Overt anti-Semitism worldwide. That's not necessarily in the media.
Well, then why where's the anti-Semitism though? Like, you literally, her example of anti-Semitism here is, you have some relief workers, you have some UN people, you have some experts, you have some journalists, and they show what's going on, which is horrible, and then they ask the person whose entire fucking job is to come on and provide some kind of a justification to do that job, and provide the official Israeli propaganda line on it. And that's the anti-Semitism, apparently. Like, to asking her to do her horrible job. And it's like, I mean, on a certain level it is, because of course one of the claims of Zionist propaganda is that they're doing this on behalf of all Jews on the planet, myself included. And that's anti-Semitic as fuck, but that's not what she's talking about. She's literally talking about people asking her to do the thing she's on air for. She's... And this is the anti-Semitism that she's experiencing. This is the fucking microaggression. She would rather they not show what's going on. Admittedly, it would make her job much easier if they didn't. But the trouble is, we're past that. We're past the place where and the media, no. They can't just pretend that if they don't show it, nobody will see it. So they have to show it. So, like, she's really, her complaint is that, the internet exists, basically.
But it's the microaggression in the media.
And
that was the entire microaggression. This is like the time that like Weed Lord on the Tim Pool cast was complaining about the Democrats during the Trump years, and he says it's unbelievable how fucking Democrats will make these rules, and then Trump breaks the rules, and then they say that he did something bad, and that's the end of the fucking anecdote. That's what she just did there. Like, she literally, like, yeah, it's such a microaggression that, they'll bring me on to justify some horrible shit, and they'll show some horrible shit, and then they'll ask me what the official line is, which I'm there to provide. End of anecdote.
And everything you're saying, I completely identify with, because they do the same thing to me, and then you have to...
You mean like the time that you lied about there being churches and Christians in Gaza? Or is this before that? Why is she dressed like Han Solo?
Putting you in a point of being defensive.
You're right, River Rune. It's another fucking white turtleneck. What's with these white turtlenecks? But with the vest now, and now she's like Han Solo.
Rather than just getting out your message. That's what they're doing. But my identify with, because they do the same thing to me, and then you have to... they're putting you in a point of being defensive rather than just getting out your message. That's what...
Yeah, you mean they're doing journalism. They're not just allowing you on there to say whatever. They're asking you questions about what's going on and providing context. This is the complaint that they have. And it's funny because this is what I was saying yesterday. I was saying the reason their propaganda is not working the way it was back in the 80s and the 90s is precisely because there is social media. You can watch, like, you aren't limited to, like, US or North American regime media. You can watch, Al Jazeera Arabic, even if you don't understand all the words in it. You can watch, like, what people literally are just live posting on social media from Gaza to see what's going on there. The problem they have is that they can't lie about it very effectively because people are actually seeing it in real time. And she just came out right there and said that, but she managed to make it sound like Israel is the victim there. Like, this is like a microaggression that the facts are getting out. Well, you just heard one specific example of the microaggression. It was like that she was asked to do the thing that she was brought on to do. That she's paid for.
But my question is, how was it different then? Did you get a different respect? Did you get a different framing? Why? Explain to us.
Oh, I bet she did, because she's talking about... See, the reason that we're talking to California native Miri Eisen, colonel from military intelligence, so probably a torturer, the reason we're talking about it is that she's like a fucking fangirl of Miri Eisen because of the great job she did of propaganda back 20 years ago during the Second Intifada. And so she said, what's the difference? And I can tell you what the fucking difference is. And I bet she's going to say it, but she's going to find a pissy way to say it. Which is that in those days, like, US media in particular would not actually feel at all compelled to provide any context. Because nobody was actually forcing their hands there yet. The internet was not to the point where, you had this level of sort of direct access to live, real-time images and shit.
It's really the differences. Because I still felt it was hostile then.
No, it was definitely hostile, but in its own way then, because of what I was doing at the time, I was the one that for the news, they loved me. This is before social media. No, you need to...
Yeah, exactly. This is before you actually, the media felt compelled to bring their game up.
Understand, before social media, before smartphones, there was only the media. And when I came to the media, Mary's going to bring a scoop.
It's just like, literally, this is wild. She's a propaganda professional, and she doesn't see how this is gonna play. She's literally saying that the reason that this was so good back in those days is that she would be allowed to frame the story with her, like, bullshit instead of having to respond to the facts. Like this, and she's decided apparently that it's a good thing for her to admit that yeah, the problem is that these days we do have to. The facts are in the room.
Now they're going to try and go against me on the scoop, but at the end, I'm way more in the know of what I was both presenting, of the understanding. I also know how to explain things in a very descriptive way. So throughout that Second Intifada, when I would come and I would talk about, the different things that are coming out of the Palestinian Authority, again, I had the authority coming from the IDF, but especially still in uniform, being an intelligence officer, right?
Yeah, and there we go. That's the whole thing. Because in those days, all you needed was one of them nice, Israeli military uniforms, and you can say, "Ooh, I'm military intelligence." And like people who don't know anything about military intelligence think, "Oh, that this person must really be fucking cool." People who don't know shit about any of this stuff, are very impressed with that sort of fucking credential and don't realize that that just means that they're a torturer who lies to people for a living. Um, yeah, and the uniform was enough to give her the authority, and she wasn't being challenged by facts. And it was very much, and as she said, it was just sort of the Palestinians' word against the Israelis' word, and the Palestinians' word was never treated well. It still isn't, even now that, there's fucking video footage backing it up.
Right now, it doesn't have to do with my being retired. It's more this general thing that an Israeli comes on. I like to be very personal. I think that the way to work with all of the international media today, let alone social media, is through personal stories. So Israel has evacuated everything up north. Hezbollah has created a buffer zone inside Israel.
I will say, unlike she's a little bit closer to getting the pronunciation correct on these Arabic words than a lot of Israeli propagandists.
It's been coming out a bit more over the last few days, the extent of the destruction of some of these communities.
I wonder, so what you're saying is that the Palestinians have allies, and this is wild. So they're the extent of the destruction of these communities. I'm sure it's bad. Okay, I'm sure it's not nice. I'm sure it's I'm sure it's very scary for the people living there. But I have a feeling that those communities still exist. Like there are still buildings that people can come back to. When the evacuation is over, they're going to be able to go and get their shit, and they might have to like get some shit fixed and stuff like that, but they will still have it because it's an actual evacuation, where not an expulsion, that they use the word evacuation to make it sound good. Yeah, so and I can see where she's really having trouble. She would be having trouble because she's talking about, she's going to try to go on there and talk about how bad it is in like fucking Kiryat Shmona or whatever up in the north. And people have images, people have seen what it looks like in, say, the north of Gaza right now.
And I get young, lovely correspondents on the northern border who are translating from Hebrew to English, and they say, I'm standing here in the settlement of Manara. And I'm like, no, don't say that, okay?
Yeah, but you're calling the thing what it is. What was the one?
Settlement of Manara.
Monaro. I'm very curious. Okay. Trying to find what town this is. Is this an actual town that exists? First of all, because I'm curious whether this is in the like Golan Heights, which is Syria. Menara. Okay. Oh, there it is. No wonder I was getting it wrong on Google. I was totally misspelling it. Now I've lost it because my mouse was jerking around. Okay. I'm just looking this up because I want to. Yeah, okay, so this is okay, this appears to be occupied Syrian territory. So yeah, it is, I mean, even under the terminological distinction based on international law that distinguishes between like the fucking settlements in the post 67 occupied territories and, you know, the settlements inside the Green Line, it's a settlement.
And I'm like, no, don't say that, okay? That word is a term that triggers a lot of other things.
Yeah, it's like, so her problem is that people aren't as eager to just lie with her.
And knowing which terms trigger it, it's called being careful, because you want to engage with your audience.
You do realize that at least technically the people you're talking to, their job is not to like provide Israeli propaganda. They're meant to be independent journalists with a certain critical distance to what they're reporting on. Like, is she seriously? I mean, this is wild. She's annoyed with these people because they're not, because they don't work for her, basically. And they don't pretend to work for her.
To settlement, and if it's the settlement of Nahal Oz and the settlement of Kfar Aza, then it is against the occupation. And
I get that in Jerusalem, the settlement of, and I
again, so they're complaining about like facts.
I say to them, there's no settlements in Jerusalem. There's neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods that you're systematically kicking the Palestinians out of.
They don't like that.
Yeah, because it's bullshit. They shouldn't like that because you're like asking them to lie for you. He thinks this is cute.
No, but they don't like our framing, but
because it's bullshit.
I try to bridge into framing, meaning I don't reject theirs. I say I'd like to phrase that in a different way. I'm very open about it because I don't want it to be, I'm not there. When we come up as the angry Israelis, then what they see is the angry Israelis.
Yeah, the thing is, it doesn't matter whether you look angry or not at this point. You could be showing up offering fucking, a potted tea and noodle kugel. It doesn't fucking matter because you're on there to justify atrocities that everybody at this point has seen. Everybody knows that you're on there to try to make it seem like what's going on is okay. And so, I mean, you could sound angry, you could sound like wonderfully cordial and shit. It doesn't fucking matter. You're trying to justify the unjustifiable, and that only works when your target audience hasn't seen it. When your target audience knows only what you're telling them. And her complaint, she's fairly explicit about it, is that now the target audience has seen things that she would not strictly choose for them to see in her role as propagandist.
Which means we're aggressive. Which means if we're aggressive, then we're the perpetrators, and it's a cycle.
And again, it goes back. We're mothers.
The aggressive perpetrators.
We're wives. We're very adept professional women.
Who gives a fuck?
We do it all, right? So we need to.
Yeah, fucking girl boss. Yeah, I mean, like, who gives a shit? Like, seriously, why do we care? We're not here to, like, for you to sell your fucking girl boss credentials. They're bringing you onto the media internationally. It's so that you can give the fucking official line of the fucking Zionist regime on whatever fucking atrocity the regime has just committed. Like, I mean, if you resent having to do that, you do have an option. Surely you've got enough years in to take the fucking pension.
Bring that to the table, and we're not the same voices as a lot of the Israeli male gruff voices that come out.
Miri, I wanted to ask you how, because I'm sure you feel this constantly. October 7th happened, and there was a lot of dry kindling all over the West in particular, and one match. And it sparked something that I think probably surprised all of us, even those, like, I can only speak for myself.
I'm just going to put another little content warning. They're probably going to, at this point, since they can try to bring in some, like, supposed Zionist victimhood, sort of rehash a lot of the propaganda narrative of what supposedly happened between the 7th and 9th of October. It's going to be racist. It's going to be, it might get graphic. Who knows? They might actually bring out some of the ones that even, like, the Israeli propagandists have now started to distance themselves from. But one thing that it is worth noting is that at this point, even, like, the leading Israeli daily newspaper, Haaretz, is calling for an independent investigation into what went down, because it's very clear that at least a significant number of the people, of the Israelis who got killed between the 7th and the 9th of October were killed by the Israeli military.
Who have always felt that there's quite a bit of anti-Semitism just under the surface in Western countries. And it's no longer under the surface, but the virulence and intensity, I just metaphorically always compare it to, like,
they're talking about the fact that, like, people saw a prison break and thought it was actually kind of cool. Like, that's what they're talking about. This is what I'm talking about. This is an anti-Semitic approach to the concept of anti-Semitism. Because what they're literally saying is that incarcerating 2 million people and, slowly killing them through starvation and disease, as the U.S. and Israel have been doing to the people of Gaza since 2006, actually. That is somehow an inherent Jewish characteristic, to the extent that if you're against that, you have to have a problem with Jews too. That's what she's doing here. And that's fucked up. That is some anti-Semitic shit, and that is just one of many examples of how Zionism is anti-Semitic.
Raging forest fire, completely out of control. How do you feel that, because that's a really new element, the openness, the toxicity. And I think that many news organizations feel that they have license to just speak to Israelis the way that they're spoken to on the streets of many Western countries.
Wait. So the issue is that they feel they have license to speak to Israeli propagandists and ask them questions? Like, are you unaware that you're a fucking ex-ambassador? You've dealt with journalists before. You know the job is to ask questions, right?
Utter disrespect and disregard. What's your take on that element?
So I was surprised by a few things on October 7th. And in this case, I could say the anti-Semitism didn't necessarily blow up on October 7th, but 8th, 9th, and there we are 2.5 months later. So I was surprised by the anti-Semitism, and I was also surprised by the level of the barbaric attack. Why am I connecting the two?
Oh, which is kind of funny, because this is from 6 days ago. At this point, we know that actually the level of the barbaric attack is considerably less barbaric than was previously claimed. I mean, let's just remember that the main thing that happened on the 7th October was that Palestinian resistance completely wrecked the forward operating bases of the Israeli military. The Israeli military completely fell apart because the Israeli military are just glorified cops. They don't know how to actually deal with people who fight with an actual armed force or anything like that. They know how to terrorize people who are defenseless. This came up, and we're gonna have to wrap up pretty soon, but I just want to point this out. Like back in 2020, there were the first ever joint German-Israeli army maneuvers in Bavaria. And I remember reading an article, and I can't for the life of me find the damn thing, and it doesn't help that I don't know what language I read it in, whether it was in English or German. But what it talked about, it interviewed some German soldiers who were involved in the exercises, and one of the things that they remarked on was that it was weird how little Israeli soldiers knew about defensive tactics, that they knew absolutely nothing about it, they weren't trained in it. All they knew how to do was offense. Because that's all they ever do. They don't have to, they're not actually used to dealing with an actual professional fighting force. On the other side, all they do is it's a flex for them if they strip a bunch of accountants and doctors and teachers naked and parade them through a fucking stadium, like, in images that to anyone who knows anything about Chile immediately bring up the coup. And let me just close on this note that, like, the reason it's nice to see that their propaganda is falling flat. It's nice to see that they're freaked out about it. They should be. It's nice to see them almost kind of getting to the point of acknowledging that the reason is that now people can see the things they're justifying rather than taking their word for it. I mean, that's what's going on. But they don't want to acknowledge that actually what's happening is they're getting to see, like, what the propaganda Israel sends out for, like, the domestic population who think this is a huge fucking flex. Who actually look at these guys vandalizing people's apartments, tearing up their furniture, stealing their shit, and and acting like this is some sort of a huge flex, or emptying their fucking clips into an empty, primary school classroom or some shit, like that's some sort of flex. And people are looking at it as like, Jesus Christ, these people are fucked up. Like, that's the problem. And it's actually really nice to see that the people whose job it is, who get paid to try to find a way to justify things that for which there is no justification, are having so much fucking trouble. The level of cope on here has been fascinating. And wow, we've almost gotten through it at this point too, amazingly. I mean, there's still 20 minutes to go, but if you want, let me know in Discord or in chat right now. I've got more of this content queued up. I would be interested to talk about it. I think that this has been a good couple of streams. It's a nice change of gears because it's easy to sort of get into sort of a bit of a rut. Not necessarily a rut, but you get into a pattern because you're dealing with the same assholes all the time. And so you end up often saying a lot of the same things. So this changes it up a bit. It's a bit more topical than some of the stuff we've done. And if you're liking that, I could totally do more of this. I got a bunch of this shit. Yeah, so let me know in Discord. And if you enjoy the stream, please consider supporting the stream with a donation via the tip command or by supporting my Patreon, link on screen. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And let me just say, I don't want to say Happy New Year. Yeah, oh, thank you. Okay, I've got a bunch more of the Zionist View on Reaction Fodder to playlist, so we can do that. And let me just say, I'm not going to say Happy New Year because that would be tempting fate. Gracias por decirlo, GGM. Because it feels like it would be tempting fate. So let's just say, let this be a survivable New Year. Okay, I'm setting my expectations low, you see. I just hope that maybe it isn't as shite as the previous three have been. That maybe we can sort of regroup, just sort of the international working class as a whole, and maybe go on the offensive and make some fucking gains, and maybe this horrible shit in Gaza might come to an end, and we could possibly get to direct our efforts as people standing in solidarity with Palestinians to fucking rebuilding the thing and demanding the complete and verifiable disarmament of Israel. Have a good night.